regular session. The first order would be first item is citizen concerns. And first, I understand there may be some final comments from citizens on the status of the chair from last week. So I'm going to allow a total of 10 minutes, allotting maximum of 2 minutes per speaker with a hard stop, and we'll start there. Matt Murphy, who's our facilitator this evening, will call on people in order of the hands raised. I will not be taking any further motions on the status of the chair this evening. After that ends, we will move into regular citizen concerns. Citizen concerns will be limited to a max of 3 minutes, hard stop. So are there any citizen concerns with respect to final comments on the status of the chair? Matt?
We do have a few hands raised.
Okay.
Some of them are up from before, so I'm going to just call on people in the order that they're brought up. And if their comments are not about the chair, I'll just leave their hand up and we'll get back to you when we go to general concerns. First up, we're going to hear from Sunanda Pepala. Sorry.
That's fine, you got it. So Sunanda Pepala, Willow Street, Acton. I'm here to read the DEIC statement today. The DEI Commission is deeply saddened, hurt, and angry by the choice of the Select Board Chair during the 4-5 and 4-12 Select Board meetings to target well-respected women of color and esteemed rabbi with denigration and falsehoods. Leadership should aspire to encourage and not engage in silencing and erasure. Targeting a young member of the DEI Commission discourages young people, vulnerable people, and others from participating in the voluntary and leadership roles on the committees, which are an important part of our Acton community function. Harassing religious officials sends a message of intolerance. Spreading falsehoods about another elected official damages the trust people place in our system of town management. The baseless, unfounded, and unbecoming verbal attacks have resulted in emotional harm and physical endangerment of the personally named members of our community and hurt the sentiment of many members of the broader Acton community. To be clear, no personal attacks or singling out by name of individuals should ever be made by elected officials, especially against people of color or representatives of religious communities, putting them at risk. The attacks were a response to social media discussions of the Select Board Chair's own record. Discussion of the public record and the reactions to it had no place in this forum. It is very important to note that there were others involved in the social media discussions, but only these women of color and rabbi were singled and targeted. Why?
30 seconds remaining.
It is also important to note the silence of all but 2 members of the Select Board in the face of the harm being done. We are disappointed that false information has been stored in the town's records due to the statements made by the chair. Finally, we urge the Select Board members not to support this style of detrimental leadership exhibited by this chair or any member in the future and reinstate the faith of the community by correcting the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to hear from Rebecca Wilson. Rebecca, you should be able to speak.
Hi there, Rebecca Wilson, Wingate Lane. First, I want to voice my support for the proposed community center. I am going to go on to say some other things. This is a much needed and highly valuable space. We should use the Kmart parcel for this, as it's a wonderfully central.
Does this relate to the status of the chair?
It will, yes. I'm just wanting to say this one quick thing.
Okay.
Just so mark me down as I'm supporting the community center. Thank you. Next, I want to say how disappointed I am in the process during the last Select Board meeting. This blame I lay at the feet of the chair, Mr. Benson. He unilaterally decided exactly how the people of Acton would be able to speak their minds regarding his retention of a position of power. It seems to me that this was a clear conflict of interest. Mr. Benson made a political calculation in order to retain power, save face, and rather than doing what was best for our community. At least 10 hands were still raised at the end of the allotted 30 minutes, but the chair decided that he was done hearing from the community on the issue. This is the hallmark of authoritarianism. This was shutting down free speech. This was undemocratic. I'll note that he's continuing to do that tonight. To quote James Baldwin, "There are so many ways of being despicable, it quite makes one's head spin. But the way to be really despicable is to be contemptuous of other people's pain. This is what John Benson, Dean Charter, and Joan Gardner have done. They heard that some of their neighbors have been harmed and are afraid and in pain. And they turned away and said that one man's career, legacy, and dignity were more important than anyone else's. This is not how a democracy is supposed to function. This is, in fact, how democracies die. I am demanding that Mr. Benson apologize to the people he named on April 5th, as well as he has refused to do so. Black Lives Matter. Thank you for your time."
Thank you. Next up, we're going to hear from Aaliyah Lane. Aaliyah, you should be able to speak.
Hi, my name is Alia Lane. I read today's agenda and I'm in shock that the issue from the April Select Board meetings is still not being addressed. In various Select Board meetings, I've heard every single member of this board make an effort to protect the privacy and anonymity of citizens of Acton. I've heard all of you say a neighbor or a well-regarded supporter or by other epithets in like a clear attempt to protect their identity. David Martin, I've seen you grant anonymity during public meetings to individuals you disagreed with. You know it's wrong to recite the full names of community members at select board meetings. Dean Charter, I've seen you grant anonymity during meetings to individuals you disagreed with. You know it's wrong to recite the full names of community members at select board meetings. Joan Gardner, I've seen you grant anonymity during public meetings to individuals you disagreed with. You know it's wrong to recite the full names of community members at select board meetings. Jim Snyder Grant, I've seen you grant anonymity during public meetings to individuals you disagreed with. And you know it's wrong to recite the full names of community members at select board meetings. But what about John Benson? I would say yes. During the April 5th and 12th meetings, John was exceptionally careful to grant his supporters anonymity while not granting the same courtesy to his critics. So yes, I believe John knows he was wrong. So if we all agree that this is wrong, why hasn't anyone apologized for John's actions? There are 5 members of the board. Your checks and balances are each other if something inappropriate happens. John is clearly emotional about losing the election. He went off the rails and did something everyone, including John, thinks
30
was
seconds remaining.
It was the board's responsibility to stop him. And I will say, just going on the side, I think I should get 3 minutes because I'm not talking about the state of the chair. I'm asking the board to apologize. This had nothing to do with you not being the chair of the board anymore. So this wasn't just John, this was a failure of the entire board. So if everyone agrees this is wrong, then how about we make our parents proud and apologize to the named individuals? Isn't that what we do when we do something wrong? We say sorry. Also, I can't leave here without pointing out that there were dozens of people who spoke up on Facebook about John.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll hear from Alyssa Nickel. Alyssa, you should be able to speak.
Good evening, this is Alyssa Nickel from South Acton. Last Monday, a petition signed by 236 Acton residents was sent to this board. Since then, an additional 20 Acton residents have signed, bringing the total to 256. The petition made 4 very reasonable demands for accountability based not on spite or pettiness, as some have suggested, but on restoring the public's faith and confidence in our town's executive body. Unfortunately, this board chose in a 3-2 vote to disregard the first demand, but I'd like to read for the record the additional 3 demands that 256 Acton residents expect the board to address. 1, a verbal and written apology issued publicly by Mr. Benson to the individuals he named during the April 5th, 2021 Select Board meeting. 2, a resolution from the Select Board condemning the chair's inappropriate behavior, expressing support for the individuals named by Mr. Benson, and affirming the public's rights to assembly and freedom of expression and the board's commitment to protecting those rights. And 3, that all current and future Select Board members participate in active bystander training. If the citizens cannot persuade Mr. Benson to issue an apology by signing a petition, writing emails, and commenting during citizens' concerns, then at the very least, this board as a body can do so. It is imperative that these demands be met before the community can, as so many are calling for, move forward in unity. These wrongs must be made right first. Mr. Benson has encouraged many people to run for elective office and volunteer on town boards and committees. I'm one of them. Mr. Benson has supported many citizens' initiatives. I was involved in several of them. Mr. Benson has achieved much during the 3-year term on the Select Board, which will benefit the town and residents. And at the same time, he has made a mistake and caused harm. I'm grateful for a lot of Mr. Benson's efforts and contributions, and at the same time, I want him to make amends and be accountable for his
Melissa,
mistakes.
you are out of time. All right, we have 1 more minute remaining. Mr. Chair, would you like to take an additional comment?
Sure.
Next up, we'll hear from Nijan Tatar, and I apologize again if I butchered anyone's name. Nijan, you should be able to speak.
We're not hearing you, Nijan. Maybe there's a unmute button.
He's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, Nijan Datar at Winthrop Drive. I thought I heard John Benson say that this is not the time for, because mine was not about the chair. Should I be coming back later? Is this only about the chair?
Only about the chair, yes, Nijan.
Oh, okay, because I just had an option to raise my hand. So when should I come back then?
Right, I think this would be the last comment, so I guess you could probably, Matt, could Nijan lead off in the regular citizen concern section?
Yes, they were up next.
Okay,
All right. So my question is about the contract that the school superintendent signed with the Visions Corporation. The main issue I have is that the money is being used to send not just town employees and elected officials, which may be okay, but private citizens to this conference. My question is, what is the law that authorizes the town to take my tax dollar and give it to my neighbor who is just a private citizen to attend an event about which I'm not allowed to know anything? This last part is the most critical, that I'm not allowed to know anything about this conference, even though I'm paying for it. And I'm paying for a private citizen to go to this conference, attend it, and I cannot know anything about it. I don't know that this is legal, but if it is, please show me the legal authority and also explain how open-ended this power is. Can you send him, my neighbor, anywhere on my tax dollar? I want to know how open-ended this power is. If it is not legal, or you cannot show me the law that authorizes it, then I expect you to cancel the next session of this conference. I'm going to be sending you an email version of what I just said. And if I don't hear an answer in the next day or two, I will consider my legal options to explore stopping this event. Because this seems blatantly illegal in its face, that you're taking my dollar, sending a private citizen to a conference, and I have no knowledge of what he's doing. You could be sending him on a junket anywhere to the Bahamas or something like that, and just telling me that I'm not allowed to know anything about it. So I would like to know what legal authority the board has, or the school committee, or the school superintendent, or the town manager to take my dollar and give it to my neighbor for this purpose. Thank you.
okay, yeah, just please send the text of your remarks to the manager.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I got a message from Mike Rothbaum, who was asking for 4 minutes, just for your information.
I got a text from you to that effect, yes.
Okay.
Everyone gets 3 minutes. Next, please.
Next, we'll hear from Melissa Brown. Melissa, you should be able to speak.
At your last meeting on 4/26, you were presented with a petition that has been signed by over 256.
We are done with that segment. If you're talking about the status of the chair.
I understand that, but the gentleman who just spoke was not speaking of the chair, and we only have.
No, we are in the regular citizen comments section of the meeting.
So we're cutting off people who would like to express.
Yes, I allotted 10 minutes to it. I said that at the outset, and you did speak last week. So next speaker, please.
Black Lives Matter.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give the users a second to adjust hands, just in case anyone still has a hand up from the previous session. While we wait for that, I believe calling user number 1 has a comment. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Jara from West Acton, and I agree with the other speakers that it should be given more time. But I didn't. I realized that you'd like us to move on from that, which I think is terrible. But I wanted to talk about the community center. I feel like that's a great way to heal divisions and to solve the problem of loneliness. And I call on our leaders to take the steps to do a visibility study and to get this topic on the next agenda. Give a presentation to these folks, let them take some time, show you what they've done. I think it's very exciting, it's very affordable, and it's something that we need now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
Next up, we're going to hear from Scott Smyers. Scott, you should be able to speak.
Hello. On March 15th, I submitted a records request to the Acton Police Department requesting any police reports regarding the Zoom bombing investigation of the school committee. On March 18th, I received a letter from the Chief of Police, as well as the redacted police reports. The letter explained legal reasons for said redactions. The letter was not CC'd to Town Council. I have 3 simple but important questions. Who did the redactions? Number 2, did the Town Council approve the redactions prior to the record's release? Number 3, did any other attorney or law firm assist in drafting the letter from the chief? These are simple questions, and I expect answers within 2 days, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next
John,
up.
did you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer those questions. We've gotten quite a few public records requests, so the particulars of that one, I don't have off the top of my head, but if there's a message to our office, we'd be happy to respond to it, or we can go back and check the tapes on those 3 questions if that's what you're asking me to do.
I think that's what Mr. Smyers is asking. So are there further citizen concerns?
Yes, Mr. Chair. From Mike Rothbaum.
Sure.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am Mike Rothbaum. I'm on Tuttle Drive. I'm the rabbi of Congregation Beth Elohim, a congregation of 270 Jewish families, including 170 kids. There is a saying, I'm not sure of the source. Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people. Seems we've all gotten stuck in a little bit of small-mindedness. Over the last few weeks, we've heard claims and counterclaims about this person and that person. It will end eventually, of course. Attention spans are short. People come and go. Select board members arrive and depart. So do members of the school committee. So do rabbis. What lasts are ideas, morals, values, principles. If we do our jobs right, they outlast us. The idea I've been advocating is that everyone in this town should feel safe, whatever their ethnicity, religion, country of origin, sexual orientation, gender expression. You've given me 3 minutes to talk about all of this. I'll do my best. We all know by now about the grotesque Nazi graffiti in town and on social media, the jokey Hail Hitler salutes in school hallways, money thrown at Jewish students who are told, pick it up, you effing Jew. When yet another swastika is found in yet another school, Peter Light dutifully calls me to give me a heads up. Nobody on the select board calls me. There's never been a statement that I know of condemnation. No select board member has ever invited me to help with this problem except once during election season. And now when we finally begin to have this conversation, we hear outrage from some quarters about a secret meeting, as if talking about hate and bigotry rather than hate and bigotry themselves are the threat. Meanwhile, the mudslinging continues and our kids continue to suffer. One AB student told me that when he saw Nazi graffiti, he was terrified. In his gut, he felt for sure the Jew haters would be coming for him personally. Another student sat in my office pre-COVID, holding back tears, asking me why the whole world hates Jews. He lives here. For the most part, his whole world is Acton. How should I have answered him? How would you answer him? Legend has it that As our beloved Isaac Davis was about to leave his house on that fateful night in 1775, he turned around and addressed his wife, Hannah. His only words were, "Take good care of the children." Can we follow Isaac Davis's counsel? Can we leave the pettiness and the bickering behind us and see to it that
30 seconds remaining.
this town takes good care of all of its children? I eagerly await your response, not just verbally, but in actions and in the legacy that you all leave. Thanks. I'm here to help.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we will hear from Barry Rosen. Barry, you should be able to speak.
Good evening. I'm talking about something completely unrelated, which might be refreshing. I just want to give you an update in the Acton Water District. And I didn't know where else this belonged on your packed agenda tonight. Keep it quick and simple. The Acton Water District annual meeting is this coming Wednesday, the 5th of May. It will begin, unlike the other meetings, because of the daylight that we want to use, at 6:00 p.m. It will be held at the Acton Water District headquarters on Massachusetts Avenue, or affectionately known as Route 111, right near the Boxborough town line. Again, it will begin at 6 p.m. rather than the usual 7 or 7:30. That is because the commissioners decided that the meeting will be a complete outdoor meeting. Should it rain, it'll be moved to a luxurious garage to keep the rain off people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry.
And that does it for hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So the next item would be chair's update, town manager update, and member minutes. So in terms of chair's update, we have our next regularly scheduled meeting is May 17th. And John Mangiarotti tells me we have a full agenda of items, including a renewed discussion on sewers, the DPW building, and other things which will take up the better part of the meeting. Let's look ahead to a meeting a week later on Monday, the 24th. That would be limited in purpose to go over the town meeting warrant, vote our recommendations on the articles. We will also do in public John Mangiarotti's annual manager's evaluation. The evaluation covers the period from May 1, 2020 through April 30, 2021. Our 5 individual evaluations were due to Marianne Fleckner last Friday. Those would be the 2 items that we will follow with an executive session after the meeting to discuss John's contract for the coming year to start July 1. And if we're in good shape, we will formally vote his contract in open session at our next regularly scheduled meeting on June 7. With respect to the community center, we had gotten several letters from residents urging us to take a look at building a community center on the Kmart parcel. The question that I had for the board is, my thought was that should be left to the next board to begin discussions on. Does that make sense to Dean, David, and Jim? Yeah, Jim?
In general, yes, I think that's fine. My only concern would be, is the current board going to be making further decisions or further updates or give guidance about the Kmart parcel before the next board is here? Are there any rumblings that we need to respond to?
Dean?
Well, I agree with Jim that it probably makes sense to hold discussion of the community center off until we get the full new board. Along those lines, what I might suggest is that the 3 members who will remain on board, we should generally do a reorganization early in the year, early in July, and then soon thereafter we do a goal setting meeting. I might suggest that if we have folks come in to talk about the community center, we do that very early in July before we set our goals. Possibility that the newly constituted board might want to put that on either a long or short-term goal. So I have my own feelings about the community center, but I wouldn't want to include anything. Have these folks come in August and we'll say, oh, gee, it's a great idea, but we've already set all our goals, so come back next year. I don't think that would be the proper way to deal with it. So that would be my suggestion. As far as anything else going on the Kmart property, I have not heard any new developments at this point. The folks that we heard from earlier, what they were proposing was to buy the property, and what they were proposing apparently was something that would not be completely in compliance with the Kelly's Corner zoning. So I don't know whether those folks are going to come forward or if it might be somebody else coming forward. But simple fact is that whatever they want to do really isn't going to involve a whole lot of input from the town. It's a privately owned parcel that's going to be perhaps purchased by a private entity, and they know that they have to comply with zoning or plan on coming back to a town meeting at some time in the future to change that zoning. So I'm not sure that we really need to provide any input. I don't think there's any opportunity. And I said, I heard nothing about any new developments on the site. At the last contact that I had virtually with those folks was the same one that all of the members of the board participated in when they did their presentation about 2 months ago. That's best I can say about the whole matter.
David?
Just to clarify, Dean, there's nothing that's happening between now and the end of the fiscal year, if I read between the lines of what you just said. Is that right?
No, nothing that I know about. Absolutely nothing. I don't know what might be in the minds of a private buyer and a private seller, but certainly I've not been appraised of anything.
Okay, and one other question is, do you have an idea what the zoning changes are and whether they would involve just a ZBA decision or whether they would involve an actual change to zoning?
Well, I believe in some of the very early discussions, there was talk about making the buildings somewhat taller than what would comply with Kelly's Corner zoning. But what they brought forward to us in that presentation was fully in compliance with zoning. And they've not brought anything forward since then. So I can't speculate. It could be some third party might come forward at some point with an idea of putting up a 7-story building. Obviously, that's going to need a zoning change. As far as exactly where things go from the ZBA to changing the underlying zoning, that gets way beyond my level of comfort. Good question to ask the town planner, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I take it that the 3 returning board members would opt to put off any discussion on the proposed community center on the Kmart site until after the new board reconvenes in July. Is that correct? Yeah.
I would be okay with that, but I'm also okay if we have extra time in a meeting of just letting them tell the town what they, present to us, let them tell the town what they have in mind. They might have to represent when we get the reconstituted board, but I don't object to that, but the next couple of meetings sound pretty full already.
Yeah.
And I do think we need to start with a feasibility study.
Okay. All right, so John, manager's update?
Thank you. Good evening. Just a few things. We were very happy to see members of the public in this morning in the building and all day. Today was the first day since March 13th of 2020 that public came in and interacted with our staff. They did so safely, and everybody that came in was happy to come in, even though they were paying their taxes. They were still happy to come in and see us. We also had some activity at the land use counter and in other parts of the building too. So it's exciting, and I can get more into the COVID update later in the meeting. So but I just wanted to mention, also in the rear parking lot, we've set up an outdoor seating area for folks that want to meet with town staff outside. I just want to take a moment to thank Kathy Fochman, our former rec director, who is she's very talented with flowers. I don't know what you call that, but she has it. And
design.
yes, and so she did some planters for us to try to brighten up the Jersey barriers that we have in the parking lot. And Tom Tidman and her took that on. So I thank you for that. And just the third item is. Actually, the second item is the North Acton Fire Station project. That project on Harris Street is moving along. We did receive a grant to move forward with the sidewalk on a portion of Harris Street, and that project is going to be starting within the next few weeks. And then the fire station project itself is on track to be completed around Halloween, end of October, is what we're looking at for this year, and it's starting, if you've driven by lately, it looks good. We are doing all the geothermal wells. We thought we might be able to get away with not doing as many, but we're doing the full amount to maximize the use of that resource. And the project is moving along nicely. So thank you for your support, and thanks to everyone. Another thing that we did is, if you've driven down Harris Street over the last however many years, you remember that ledge outcropping that you always tried to avoid? The reason that was there for so long is there was a natural gas pipe, line right near it, and so we were always afraid to deal with it. But we worked with the gas company, and Public Works took care of it. So I want to thank them for that, to improve the safety of that corner, or that turn rather, on Harris Street. Finally, I presented along with Selectboard Charter and Andy Brockway and Town Planner Kristen Guichard, the Kelly's Corner pedestrian streetlight project. We presented that to the Finance Committee last week, and they had some really good questions for us. And as a result, I followed up at the end of last week with a memo to the Finance Committee, which I intend to present to them again. But I wanted to share with the board now a very important part of it. We're calling it pedestrian scale lighting project. We're calling it non-participating, meaning that the state's paying $18 million for the whole intersection for Kelly's Corner. And this approximately $1 million, not $981,000, is non-participating. But the rest of the story is that they are participating, and they're paying almost 40% of the cost, the total cost of putting in these lights. And that was something that I think Finance Committee asked about. It was a great question, and so we'll provide that breakdown in both the Finance Committee at its next meeting, and we'll certainly include that in presentations to town meetings. That we're investing in this. Infrastructure to make the project look the way we want it and have it safe that we want it to be safe. But the state is kicking in a considerable amount for us to accomplish this project. So just wanted to mention that in my opening remarks. So thank you.
Sure. Member minutes, Jim?
Okay, I got two things to mention. First of all, this Thursday, May 6th, the Water Resources Advisory Committee is meeting for the first time in more than a year. Their main topic is going to be considering whether they have the enthusiasm to focus in on the water study, the same water study that was recommended at a non-binding resolution at town meeting in 2017. So it's great to see a town committee ready to, look into whether they can do if they can, and I'm full confidence in them, in their ability to do this. I may be back to the board with some adjustments in their charter, just to clarify that is indeed their focus for a while. The next piece is fun news about the Arboretum and the Commission on Disabilities. If you have been to the entrance recently to the Arboretum, at the edge of the parking lot, there's a new way into the Arboretum, which was paid for largely by Community Preservation Act funds, which leads to the kiosk, which was put up recently. And behind the kiosk now are handicap accessible planters, so that if you are in a wheelchair, or if you can't bend down to the ground, this gives you a chance to get up close and personal with flowers. And the planting and the labor was provided by a combination of Arboretum volunteers and town staff and Commission on Disabilities volunteers. And the Commission on Disabilities also put in the money to pay for these planters. And they're lovely. It's a great place to see a rotating set of flowers. That's it.
Thanks, Jim. Joan? No. David?
Yes, the on-site portion of the archaeological survey at the 53 River Street property just completed. Quite a number of things were found, including a large quantity of shoddy wool, considering how old the wool is. It's kind of amazing that it's still there. Things like buttons, char from when the mill burned, and also some rusty iron machinery. So it's pretty interesting what was found there. The 53 River Street committee will be planning an on-site, a site walk at some point to look at the finds. Personally.
Okay, thank you. Dean?
Thank you. Yeah, the only comment I have is I was concerned with the statement from the DEIC that was sent to the board and was read into the record today. And I'm not going to address any of the comments that were made, the content of the document itself. It is what it is. And certainly people as individuals or members of groups, I certainly encourage them to speak their minds. I think it's very important. But I'm a little bit concerned with the town board or committee developing a political position of that nature and basically being in contradiction to the Board of Selectmen, or the Selectboard, I should say. This, to my knowledge, is kind of unprecedented. And my concern is that not what they said, it was perhaps how the committee said it, how it was composed. Certainly, all read the letter from the individual on the DEIC who felt pressured and ended up resigning from the DEIC as a result of this process. I'm concerned that the board, in good faith, established the DEIC, set a charge out, asked the DEIC to complete the charge. And I think that taking a political position in this fashion really will undercut and assaults the credibility of the DEIC, that it's suddenly become like another leg of government that's independent upon itself. I don't think that, I can't remember a situation where, the Conservation Commission, Recreation Commission, or any other board or committee has taken those actions. So as I said, the content is the content. People certainly have the right, and I encourage them to make whatever statements they want. But I'm very concerned about the process that was followed on this. So, just my opinion. David Martin is chair at the DEIC and certainly can take my comments in the collaborative fashion in which they're offered. But I'm very concerned, and I think that it might actually be to the detriment of the DEIC when the general public starts to perceive the DEIC, correctly or incorrectly, as being sort of a politically motivated body. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. John, under new special business, COVID-19 response update.
Thank you. I mentioned that today we reopened the buildings to public after more than a year. That's Town Hall, 30 Sudbury as well, and other buildings were opened for the first time today. The library continues its in-person browsing program on a limited schedule. That's on its website, and that will continue for the near future. And we hope to expand that, continue to expand that as health metrics trend in the right direction. As of today, I'm just double checking the latest number, but it's actually in single digits, the number of cases we have in the community, which is a positive, which is a encouraging sign. We have 8 current cases with a total overall of 962 since this started. 8 is the lowest it's been since, I want to say October. Yeah, it's the lowest it's been since October. So hopefully that'll continue, and vaccinations that have been widespread and they're becoming much more available, that will continue, and we'll get past this this time. In terms of operations, there's one item I wanted to bring to the board's attention to make sure there weren't any concerns. When we first started in the pandemic, we changed operating hours at the transfer station. The idea being that opening previously we were open 5 days a week, and about a third of the town uses the transfer station. So if a third of the town is going someplace for 5 days, add a 6th day, and they'll spread them out more and less chance of interaction and contact. And that worked pretty well. And we also gave extra time for seniors early in the morning, and that worked really well. And the transfer station folks did a really good job of being safe. But we did some analysis, and we think that Mondays are pretty slow comparatively, and we'd like to go back to the previous schedule of running Tuesday to Saturday. So we were planning on starting that, I believe, I think we're going to start June 1st, but I wanted to make sure the board didn't have any concerns with that before we move forward with that plan.
Any comments on the proposal to go back to normal transfer station hours as of June 1?
Good
Okay,
idea.
good idea. So we're all thumbs up.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, other than that, we're continuing all the practices that we need to be. It was really fun on Friday taking down all the signs that said building closed and all the different things that we put everywhere. That was kind of a nice moment for many of the staff, and I was out there helping with that. And we put up some new signs that say friendly things like "Welcome back" and "Wash your hands" and things like that. So it's nice to see people, and hopefully everybody continue to stay safe. And in terms of the vaccination clinic that we were trying to establish with 8 other towns, we still don't have an answer on that. Today, the governor announced that they're actually closing 4 of the MassVac sites, but that they're gonna, there's one in Denver, Fort Devens that's opening in the near future, which would help people out our way. So it's still no news on our local site. Just wanted to mention that again. That's all I have.
Thank you. Were there any questions for John from board members? Okay. Our next item is to announce the recipients of the Colonel Francis Faulkner Senior Volunteer of the Year Award. The ceremony will be outdoors at the NARA Pavilion. on Thursday, June 3, from 5 to 7 p.m. So if we could just go around the room, Jim, starting with you, each selectman nominates their 5 recipients. Each select board member selects 1 recipient. So Jim, who is yours?
Ann Corcoran, who some of you know as Nancy Corcoran.
That's great. And Joan?
Tom Gillespie, chair at the dog park.
Okay. David?
Diane Randolph Jones, who's the vice chair of the DEIC.
Mm-hmm. And Dean?
Ray Jacoby, who has many years of service on the planning board and on CPC, and is presently the chairman of the CPC.
Okay, and mine is Marion Maxwell, who for many years was on the Board of Appeals, the Council of Aging, and for the last several years has been editor of the Acton Senior newsletter, which goes out to over 400 email addresses several times a week. And I've encouraged people to, if you really want to know what's going on at Acton, sign up for Marion's newsletter. So 5 wonderful choices. Each member will be asked to give an introductory speech for their nominee, and each nominee will be given time to make their feelings and comments known. So it's really a very nice event, and I think weather-wise we should be in a good position, a June 3rd date as opposed to a middle May date as we had last year. So I look forward to that. David?
Yeah, considering the limitations on sizes of outdoor gatherings, I wonder if the manager could tell us if the award recipients could bring family members, if we'll have the capacity for them to bring family members to the ceremony.
Yes, I think that what we'll do is Lisa will send out invitations, and we'll ask people to RSVP, and we'll manage the number and make sure it's appropriate given the guidance at the time. But it would be great to have family members attend. So I think we can make that work.
Thank you.
What do we have to keep it to under? Is it 50 or 100 at this point?
The numbers keep moving on me, so I don't want to say it incorrectly, but it's increased from what it was just 2 weeks ago. So I think we'll be in good shape in June.
Okay. Well, keep us posted, and it does. I've noticed in the past recipients do bring family members, and it's good. Thank you. Next item is to review the proposed plan to develop a climate action plan. John and Jim.
Thank you. I'll defer to Select Board Member Snyder Grant, and I look forward to the presentation from our Sustainability Director.
Andrea has been handling this process with the Green Advisory Board and with a few of us who form an informal sustainability working group. I've seen a preview of this presentation. I've seen questions and comments come in as people have had a chance to look at it, and I'm very excited to have Andrea share this with the rest of the board and with everybody watching. Take it away, Andrea.
Andrea.
Great, thank you so much, Jim. Can we also promote Julie Curdy?
Sure.
Great, thank you. And I'll go ahead and get started while she gets on. How does that look? Can everyone see the presentation?
Looks great.
Great. Good evening, Select Board members and community members. I had the opportunity to introduce myself when I started 3 months ago, and now I'm excited to be here again to present the Town of Acton Climate Action Plan Blueprint Scope of Work. For members of the public who are tuning in and seeing me for the first time, my name is Andrea Becerra. I'm the new Sustainability Director. I'm starting this position after more than 8 years of working in sustainable development, including 5 years with the environmental nonprofit organization, the Natural Resources Defense Council, known as NRDC. And I also received a master's in environment and resource planning and integrated water management planning from the Tufts University. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to spend about 3 minutes summarizing some of the great sustainability and environmental work that the town has already been working on, about 3 minutes introducing the MAPC team, and about 6 minutes providing you with a project overview, and we'll leave some time for questions and feedback. Acton has a long history of sustainability with a passionate and engaged community that continues to push for actions that protect and preserve the town's rich biodiversity and also speed the shift towards cleaner and greener technology and development in response to climate change. From the town's designation as a Tree City USA for 24 years in a row, an honor granted by the Arbor Day Foundation for commitment to urban forestry, community improvement, and civic pride, to the installation of 8 EV chargers around town, and the ballot-approved construction for a triple net zero elementary school and net zero ready fire station in North Acton. Acton has demonstrated both a commitment and innovative spirit to address climate change and advance sustainability goals. These are a few examples of many sustainability actions that have taken place to date. There is the Environmental Sustainability Policy passed on December 10th, 2018, the Greenhouse Gas Inventory led by the Green Advisory Board in 2019, and of course the September 8th town meeting declaring a climate emergency, which received near unanimous approval, calling for a better future starting now. Building on the comprehensive work that has been accomplished to date, we have signed a contract with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to collaborate on a 9-month plan for the development of a climate action plan blueprint that will seek staff, expert, and community-wide input to establish immediate, midterm, and long-term targets to achieve carbon neutrality and curb emissions in the stationary, energy, transportation, and waste sectors through cost-effective and equitable strategies. To move from concept to action and effectively kickstart a better future starting now, the plan will include appropriately ambitious deadlines to tackle emissions in our buildings, in our energy, our mobility, and nature. Resilience and equity will be a guiding framework as we build out the solutions. For instance, how can our forest management support carbon sequestration, and how can energy efficiency targets reduce the energy burden for low-income communities? Before we dive into the scope of work, I would love to introduce the MAPC team to all of you. Julie Curdy, who's here with us today, will be the project manager. Julie Curdy is a clean energy and climate strategy manager and senior planner at MAPC. She supports MAPC communities working on climate mitigation and adaptation planning and implementation. Julie currently runs MAPC's Green Municipal Aggregation Program, which helps communities procure renewable electricity. She's also the sub-regional coordinator for the Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, known as MAGIC, which Acton is a part of. Previous to MAPC, Julie worked with the Cadmus Group. There, she facilitated a stakeholder working group focused on increasing access to affordable and efficient clean energy for low-income households in Massachusetts, and worked with Washington, D.C. to implement the district's Climate Ready D.C. plan. Julie holds a master's in city planning degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology with a certificate in environmental policy and planning and a BA in geography and political science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is also a trained facilitator and certified mediator in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Van Du will be the strategy lead. She recently joined MAPC as senior environmental planner. Prior to MAPC, she was a sustainability planner at BHB, supporting climate work for both private and public organizations. She has developed sustainability and resilience plans for Massachusetts communities, including Boston, as well as other cities like Rochester, New York, and the city of Orlando, Florida. She also supported higher education institutions and their climate action goals. Van is a certified Envision sustainability professional, lead green associate, and WELL AP. She has a bachelor's degree in environmental sociology and a master's degree in city planning and urban affairs. Yolanda Spinola will be our community engagement lead. Yolanda engages and connects with people and groups throughout the MAPC region to support community planning efforts. As part of the community engagement team, Yolanda helps inform, empower, and assist regional stakeholders. Prior to joining MAPC, Yolanda was a graduate fellow at North Shore CDC and Catholic Charities in Salem, Massachusetts. Yolando graduated from Merrimack College in 2018 with a Master's of Education in Community Engagement. Yolando received a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology with a minor in Geography and Political Science from Bridgewater State University in 2012. Finally, Cami Peterson will be the advisor and has been MAPC's Clean Energy Department since 2013 and has served as director since early 2016. As director of the department, she oversees MAPC's clean energy and climate mitigation work, including local clean energy and climate planning, regional clean energy procurements, and local and state clean energy and climate policy. Under her leadership, the department has launched an innovative net zero planning platform, pioneered a groundbreaking green municipal aggregation program, and received a 2018 Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources Leading by Example Award. She earned a master's degree in urban and environmental policy and planning from Tufts University, and she holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Harvard University. And now I'll hand it over to Julie, who will tell you a little bit more about MAPC.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrea, to the select board members, the town manager, and all the community members at today's meeting. We're really excited to be working with the Town of Acton on this project. So as Andrea mentioned, I work for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, or MAPC. And for those of you not familiar, we're the regional planning body for the greater Boston region. So we have just about 100 staff who are planners and other content area specialists, and they work across transportation, housing, land use, environment, clean energy, community engagement, and more. We're a quasi-state agency, and we were chartered to serve the 101 cities and towns in the greater Boston region that you can see on the map. And our goal is to provide increased capacity and technical expertise to local governments throughout our region. And so as Andrea shared, our team on this project will be interdisciplinary. Yolando, Van, Cami, and I, we span the environment, the clean energy, the community engagement teams at MAPC, and we have other staff members we can bring in as needed as well to support the work. The next slide. For just a little more context about how we approach climate planning at MAPC, we've been working with many communities in our region on climate planning. So we recently completed net zero action plans with Melrose, Arlington, and Natick, and a climate action plan with Newton. And we're currently working with Belmont, Ipswich, Hingham, and Peabody on net zero plans as well. And so alongside all of this work, we've been trying to develop municipal guidance on actionable local level strategies across different sectors that municipalities can take on climate action. So buildings, mobility, clean energy, and zoning are areas where we focus to date. And we've been putting those together and developing a municipal net zero playbook that we'll be drawing from as part of this process. And it includes best and impactful practices that local governments can take for climate action. Next slide. I think the other framing piece we wanted to share is that our approach to climate action planning with the town will really emphasize the co-benefits of climate action. So wherever possible, we want to pursue strategies in this work that achieve multiple goods for your town, in addition to greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So central to this work will be equity, so ensuring that actions we take advance racial, social, and economic justice and do no harm. And then there's also opportunities to have public health benefits, climate resilience benefits, and other economic co-benefits via this work. And you can see just a few examples of those on the slide here. I'll pass it back over to Andrea to give a little bit of an overview about the goals of the work, and we'll quickly talk through the work plan from there.
So by November of this year, we will have developed a CAP blueprint. So this will include 15 to 20 prioritized strategy pathways for the first 5 to 10 years with recommendations for buildings, energy supply, mobility, and nature-based solutions. With support from MAPC, we will also draw upon our extensive knowledge of impactful CAP strategies and work with town staff, the CAP working groups, the Acton Boxborough Regional School District, the Green Advisory Board, and other key environmental organizations and key community actors to develop an initial list of strategies for consideration, and will gather extensive feedback on the list of strategies through a community engagement process to narrow and refine this list. Equity will be a central factor throughout the planning process. Project goals include broad and inclusive engagement of Town of Acton residents in the climate action planning process, setting climate goals for the plan that align with the priorities established in the town's climate emergency declaration, which explicitly states that members of Acton town meeting call on town government and staff and all Acton civic groups, businesses, and residents to commit to a climate mobilization effort with appropriate support from the state and federal governments to bring net townwide carbon emissions to zero as quickly as possible with a target date of 2030. Goals also include developing mitigation strategies that center on equity and enhance community resilience wherever possible. In addition, as stated in the emergency declaration, pursue a plan that ensures that the cost of such mobilization efforts do not unfairly burden those who are economically or socially disadvantaged, and that all the benefits of a realized sustainable future accrue to all. So now I'll hand it back to Julie to run through the details of the scope.
Great. So we're going to be jumping in right away to this process, and it will last from now until November of next year. And you can see here on the Gantt chart and timeline for the project, the different steps that we are going to take as part of this work. And I just would emphasize that stakeholder and community engagement are really central throughout the process, and engagement that's inclusive and accessible to Acton residents. And then the stakeholder engagement and community engagement are also iterative with the strategy development, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So this month we'll be jumping into stakeholder mapping, so trying to understand who all of the different groups are in the community who we should engage through this process, and we'll develop a tailored community engagement plan based on that work. We'll develop outreach materials for the town of Acton and also hold focus groups throughout the project that are focused on bringing people to the table who are not often involved in climate action planning discussions. And that first focus group will focus on getting input on vision and goals as part of this plan, and later on strategies. For the next slide. You can also expect to see a community-wide survey coming out pretty soon. That will be an online survey to get input on the climate action planning process from as many residents of Acton as possible. That will inform the plan. And we'll have 2 community workshops, the first in June and the second planned for September. The first workshop will be a community visioning workshop to help develop the town's vision for the climate action blueprint. And then the September workshop will be focusing on the strategies and really prioritizing among the strategy options for the town. So thinking about, besides emissions reductions, what other priorities should we think about when picking strategies to focus on? So the impact of the strategy, the cost, the ease of implementation, the speed, different co-benefits, for example, are what we can talk about at that workshop. And then on the third slide, or the next slide, just as noted earlier, strategy development will be really iterative with the community engagement throughout the process. So we'll work with the community, with your community on goal setting, and also on strategy review. So developing an initial list of climate action blueprint strategies that we can get community input on, and then revising and prioritizing those strategies, and ultimately coming up with a list of 15 to 20 prioritized strategy pathways that will really guide Acton's climate action for the next 5 to 10 years and help you meet the ambitious goals that you've set as a community. And along the way, there will be opportunities for engagement. And I think Andrea has her contact information on the next slide, so you can get in touch with her, and we'll set up a listserv as well. So there's lots of ways to communicate with us throughout the process.
So as Julie mentioned, starting this week and next week, we'll be kicking off the stakeholder assessment. We will be doing a community-wide survey at the end of May, and we will prepare a community workshop in June. A big thank you to the town manager, the Green Advisory Board, and other members of the community who provided their input on the scope. We look forward to hearing from all of you as we kickstart this work. As Julie mentioned, here's my email. Please feel free to contact me if you want to stay in the loop about the climate action plan process. We're keeping a running list of people, and we hope to have a page up soon on the Town of Acton website where we will be providing continuous updates throughout the process. And with that, we leave it open to questions or feedback.
Thank you, Andrea. So any questions or comments from board members before we go to the audience? David.
Yes, I was wondering if in the other municipalities that the MAPC was working with on climate action plans, have there been limitations on what municipalities are allowed to do under state law that they run into? And are those a problem?
Yes, I think you raise a good point about the spheres of influence that a municipality has. So we try to divide actions into what's directly in your municipal control and then what you can influence at different levels. One of the biggest barriers to some action on building scale has been the state building code, which the state controls, not municipalities. And you've had the option as municipalities to adopt the stretch code, which I know Acton has. And in the recently passed climate bill, there's a net zero stretch code that the state will be developing. And we expect that that will help a lot in municipalities reaching their goals. But for some, it may not go quite as far as they may want it to. It remains to be seen. So that would be one example I'd share. I think other state actions that we obviously need are more funding to take action locally. So we'll be looking for that as well, but really try to help you develop as many strategies that are actionable locally and then point to those where you can influence the state, hopefully, to reach your goals as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions from other board members? Jim? You're unmute.
Yes, the unmute, very important. So just to confirm some things I've heard, it seems like the scope of emissions that will be addressed in the report are still up for discussion. That seems to be that's part of the community input stage. Things like whether we're going to include so-called scope 3 emissions like airplane trips by individual household is still a unsettled question. Whether we're going to include sequestration by trees and so on, and whether we're going to include measuring and controlling the climate impact of our various permitting choices and our permitting processes. Is it still true that those are all like possibilities depending on community input?
Yeah, and I can speak to this, and Julie, feel free to fill in any gaps. So for the first workshops where we seek community input, it'll sort of be pretty much anything, no bars hold. So people can really envision the future they really, really want, and it can be as idealistic, as they want it to be. And then in the second workshop, we will be strategizing that vision. So figuring out what makes sense in terms of cost, what makes sense in terms of what's actually feasible within the boundaries of the town, sort of what Julie was mentioning in terms of the barriers that we have to take into account. But yes, there will be a space to mention all types of emissions. Would you agree with that, Julie?
Yeah, I think you're alluding in that first point to consumption-based inventories for greenhouse gas emissions. And some very ambitious communities are starting to look towards those and recognize that the items that we consume, even though those emissions might be generated in their production outside of the official bounds of your town, obviously their production still is linked to your activity. So should we be counting those in greenhouse gas inventories? And I think that's an open discussion we can have as part of the community workshops and input. I will say it's a lot harder to measure scope 3 emissions. Those are very tricky inventories to do. So currently MAPC has a GHG inventory tool that focuses on scope 1 and scope 2 emissions and not scope 3 yet. But that is something certainly the town could explore, and I would say probably set it as a goal for the future to start to measure and then try to reduce. And it is important for climate action in the future that we do focus on consumption.
Thanks. Any comments from any other select board members? Questions? All right, so let's take, Matt, let's take questions from the audience, please.
Okay, first up, we'll be hearing from a call-in user. I believe this is Tara. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, it's Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So my concern is like what Jim said about, and thank you, Jim, for bringing it up, our choices about permitting and the allowance of, we lose 40 to 50 acres a day in Massachusetts, largely for unnecessary development. And so there's lots of things that we could do locally, and to leave that out of the equation, I mean, if you get all of the energy to be all renewable and the soil is dead, then what was the point? I mean, we need to have biodiversity. We need to include it in the equation. Yes, it's hard, and I understand the state doesn't want to. The state's measurements have largely suspiciously discluded anything to do with growth. And so I feel like it's a real crime that we can correct here locally. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Next up, we'll hear from Bob Van Meter. Bob, you should be able to speak.
I'm curious about housing choice legislation and the state's request that MBTA communities zone for transit-oriented development, a multifamily zone, and whether this plan will help the town take advantage of housing choice legislation. I guess I'm speaking in contrast to the prior speaker. I feel like multifamily development in Acton would be a very great benefit for our long-term climate resilience and reduce greenhouse gas emissions per household. So I'm curious, is this the first plan that MAPC has done since housing choice was passed, or have you been involved in some other ones that have taken in consideration of housing choice?
So we have several other climate action plan and net zero plans in process right now at similar stages to what we are with the town of Acton. At the same time, we also have a whole housing team at MAPC that is doing a lot of projects with communities right now. So housing production plans, and then also specific zoning plans that are looking at those questions of residential development and mixed use development around transit sites. So I think depending on where the direction of this project goes, there could definitely be a pathway or multiple pathways that point to those goals of reaching more affordable housing and also having that help meet climate goals. I think it will just kind of depend on where the process guides us. And then if there was more specific work needed, I think we could help Acton seek support. If there was specific zoning that needed to be done or other work via a separate process, that could be something that could come out of this process perhaps.
Has the work that you all did in Newton been part of the zoning discussions in Newton or not?
I don't actually know the answer to that question. That planning process predated my time at MAPC, but I could follow up with my colleagues if you wanted to know about that. You could send Andrea an email and we could follow up with you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, we have one more comment.
Sure.
I'm going to butcher this name and I apologize in advance. Himaji, you should be able to speak.
Thank you so much. So my name is Himaja. Really great to be here, and I really appreciated your focus around social equity and environmental justice, and specifically your commitment to gathering input from underrepresented groups, because as we know, climate issues affect marginalized people disproportionately. I'd love more specific details around what steps will be taken to actively reach out and gather input from underrepresented and more vulnerable groups, such as people of color, young people, seniors, women, people with low income, people from the LGBTQ+ community, and people with disabilities and underlying medical conditions. Underrepresented groups have other challenges and burdens, which often means that it's inadequate to simply create open spaces for discussion and feedback. And we need more targeted outreach in those cases. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. So we have thought about this question quite a bit, and as we start off the process, we're going to really identify who the underrepresented groups are in Acton, and really identify what the barriers are for their participation, because we want anyone who wants to participate in this process to be able to do so. So if that barrier is translation, for example, we'll ensure that items are translated, especially key messages. We'll think about the ways that we're communicating and doing the outreach. Is it only through the website? Probably not. We're going to find ways of doing this in an in-person capacity too, like maybe flyers. So we'll get creative about the way that we communicate the climate action plan process and the way we seek community input. Julie, would you like to share your experience with MAPC addressing this issue?
Yeah, absolutely, and appreciate that question a lot. I just add a few other pieces of our work plan as noted. We also plan to do focus groups, which we find can also be a good way to bring other people to the table who haven't had their voice be heard before on issues. So people who we'd want to reach out to for the focus groups will identify via the stakeholder assessment that Andrea mentioned. And those focus groups will really look to help inform the vision and the strategies as part of the plan. I think we'll also look to identify who key partners are in the community, so organizations that we should be in touch with and who leads those organizations who can help get out messages about the plan and solicit participation that way as another strategy. And then my colleague Iolando, who's going to work on the project, this is what he does day in, day out with the team at MAPC engagement. So we'll be looking to his expertise throughout to make sure that we have broad and inclusive engagement.
Thank you. Are there any other citizen comments?
There is not.
Okay. Are there any final comments from select board members? Andrea, Julie, thank you very much for getting us going. A very good beginning.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, the next item is approve a letter of support for a municipal vulnerability preparedness action grant. John?
Thank you. This is a project that Andrea is leading. I don't know if she dropped off entirely, but it's simply asking the board to authorize the chair to write a letter of support for us to go after this funding. It's a collaborative project that we're working on with the school district. And we think it will help with working on our sustainability initiatives.
Okay, so the letter was in the packet. You all should have it and read it. If it's thumbs up, I'm prepared to sign it on behalf of the board. All good? All right, so I will come by town hall tomorrow and sign it up.
Come on down.
Thank you. All right. Item 5 is discuss a proposal for disposition of 26 Carlisle Road for affordable housing. We had put this over from last week, not having had an opportunity to review the proposal. We've received the proposal. I assume everyone has read it. John, who should we lead off with?
So thank you. Director, Land Use and Economic Development Director Selby's here to talk us through this process and proposal, and also the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity is here as well. But if we could start with Selby, that would be great.
Great. Selby.
Oh, Matt, could you bring him in, please?
He should be up now.
Thanks.
He's muted.
Hello, can you hear me? I don't have my earbuds in, and normally people can hear me if I don't.
We can hear you.
All right, great, awesome. So hello, everybody. My name's Selby. I'm your Land Use and Economic Development Director. Tonight we're talking about 26 Carlisle Road. 26 Carlisle Road is a three-bedroom single-family house, approximately 1,156 square feet in size on an approximately 1/3 acre lot. The property was taken for non-payment of taxes in 2017. The house was vacant for many years before the town took possession, and it is considered a complete tear down. It has been condemned. Due to Title V provisions, the septic did fail, a Title V inspection that we did shortly after we acquired it. And due to Title V provisions, it cannot be demolished until a new septic system is designed and approved by the Board of Health. If we were to do so, the lot would be rendered unbuildable. Soil testing was conducted in March of 2020 to determine that a replacement septic system could be designed and permitted by the Board of Health. From a zoning perspective, the property is in the R2 zone, which requires a 20,000 square foot lot with 150 feet of frontage. So this property is considered non-conforming, and a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals will be required to construct the house. When the town was considering what to do with the property, I reached out to Carolyn Reed from Habitat for Humanity to see if their organization would be interested in rebuilding the property for affordable housing, as they did successfully with the 43 to 45 School Street tax-taking property a few years ago. So at the direction of the select board and the town manager, I issued a request for proposals for disposition of the property for affordable housing purposes. There was only one respondent, which was Habitat for Humanity. I do believe that Carolyn Reed, Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity North Central Massachusetts, is here to share the particulars of the proposal. If not, I can go through it with you.
All right, so Carolyn?
Caroline should be coming up.
Hi.
Good evening.
Hi. So our proposal is that we, if at all possible, reuse the foundation of the existing home. We will demolish the home and we'll build a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, single-story home. We do build the houses to be accessible, and we have been gifted for over the next several years solar panels, so we hope to have it solar powered as well. Our homeownership program is for families earning 30 to 60% of area median income. So after the project is permitted, we do put out applications for the home. Right now we have over 300 people who are waiting for an application to open. So we have many, many families who are interested in the home. The family will put in 200 to 350 hours helping to build the home. They will have a 0% mortgage structured for their income, making sure that they never pay more than 30% of their gross income, including taxes and insurance for the home. We do hold our own mortgages, so we do collect the mortgages over time. Generally, our mortgages are 30 years, but we can go out longer than 30 years to make sure the home is affordable. So the budget that was included in the proposal is cost of materials. We generally price the house right around the cost of materials. We do hope that some materials are donated, like the solar panels, to allow us to do that economically. And then we do continue to raise funds. So any funds requested for the home are restricted funds, and we do continue to raise funds over time to cover operating costs, including our insurance and the cost of our construction manager, because the homes are generally built under the supervision of our construction manager, but using local volunteers. And we are set up as an independent affiliate of Habitat for Humanity International. We serve from Acton out to Athol and raise our funds in the local area. So we do partner with the towns when we do this. All of the homes we built in Acton and throughout our local communities are part of the Local Action Unit program under DHCD. So we will do a regulatory agreement. We will make sure that the program, that the home is affordable in perpetuity. So we'll have a deed restriction and a regulatory agreement. So if the homeowner does choose to sell, it will go to another family earning 60% or less of area median income. So we do seek grant funding for these homes. We do work with some private foundations. We also do form a local project committee every time we build a house. So we have a fairly strong one already in Acton from the School Street homes. So we would resurrect that as well. We have a number of faith communities that will be involved. And someone from Acton will sit on the family selection committee for this. So we always make sure there's a local person on the family selection committee. So any questions? That was a quick overview of the proposal.
Questions from board members? Comments?
No, I've driven by this site too many times, and I'm thrilled that we're going to renew it.
David.
Sadly, you're muted. Sorry about that. I've asked this question before. How much funding will you request from CPC?
So we are requesting $40,000 from CPC of the community housing funds to assist with the build, and we'll be applying for funds through ACHC as well. And it's similar to School Street. For School Street, we applied to this, as you know, to the CPC for historical funding to help us with the historical preservation, and then some community housing funding as well.
Yeah, I just object to a little bit the town supplying all the funding for this, because we also have a number of, housing projects going on that are come after our funds, ACHC funds and CPC funds. And we're already donating the land here. I would be, I just want to see us leverage our housing funds as much as possible, and using a large portion of funds to build a single family house is not, in addition to donating the land, is not the best. I mean, I would rather see the funds for the construction come from a non-municipal source.
So we will continue to raise funds, and we will build the house either way. But it's definitely not 100% that you're funding. So we expect this house to cost almost $180,000 for cost of materials only. And then we'll still have to raise funds for the construction manager, for the insurance to do this. So we're definitely not requesting 100%. And I do want to say, I understand that the different pulls on the CPA funds. I know some are dedicated for affordable housing, and you have multiple things to support the housing authority. But for diversity of housing in the town, it's a great thing to have home ownership as well. So having a mix of individual units where people can own their own home, start building generational wealth, and break the cycle of poverty is a great way to do it. And having diversity within each neighborhood. So with the School Street units, we got diversity of housing within that neighborhood, and this will add it to another neighborhood and also give you more diversity of rental housing versus home ownership housing.
Yes, I don't want to come off as being unsupportive. I mean, I'm very supportive of Habitat in general, and probably this as well. It's just that I'd like to see the burden spread out, and also Habitat gets paid back the money from the mortgage. I realize that's over time, but again, that we're using town funds, and they're in some ways negatively leveraged against other funds. And so, I just have a little bit of a problem with that. I've said my piece. Thank you.
Jim.
I think Habitat's just a wonderful example of communities coming together to serve the community. So I'm enthusiastic about the project. One of the questions I had, maybe this is for John or for Bob Van Meter, if he's still on the call. The last time we talked briefly about the possibility of a Habitat house, for example, in the Piper Lane lot, and heard from the ACHC that no, this wasn't really a good use for them of their funds. And so hearing a positive recommendation from ACHC would be a big plus, since they're the ones who are, would be providing the funds from their community housing fund. So I'm wondering, John, since you're the rep to ACHC, or if
is either Bob or Janet Adachi available now?
They both have their hands up.
Great.
Sure, let's hear from Janet. As the chair.
Janet should be able to speak now.
Hi, Janet Adachi, Simon Hapgood Lane, and also chairman of the ACHC. Good evening, everybody. The ACHC has not yet discussed this particular project because it's sort of brand new, but historically, I think Acton has 3 or 4 sites with Habitat houses. And historically, ACHC has always provided some sort of grant, generally in the vicinity of $60,000. This is not, and the ask that Habitat is proposing from ACHC is not out of line with what ACHC has historically provided. I mean, obviously that's subject to discussion, but I think in general, I'm assuming that members of the committee are going to be very supportive of this proposal. I would add that there is a lot of sweat equity, not just by the homeowners, but a lot of volunteers. If you've ever seen a Habitat site, you see all of the people from, including the church groups and whatnot, but you get a lot of people coming together to work in the house with varied skills. They always have skilled tradesmen who make sure that everything is done right and do the high skill stuff. But it's a wonderful way for people to come together and support an affordable housing creation that in a very meaningful way. And this will put a house that has basically not been contributing to the tax base back on the tax rolls. And it will well, I've driven by the site, as has Joan. And it's just, it would be nice to have a house there instead of what's there, which is it must be very discouraging for the people who live on that street to drive by all the time. So, but I will certainly, now that we know that this is, that we have a proposal, I certainly will bring it up with my committee. So, Bob, if you have anything to add.
Bob?
There I am. Okay. Yeah, I do have a couple of things to add. Having served on the local project committee for the River Street House and participating in building volunteer days with my church, the South Acton Congregational Church, I guess I would reiterate what Jim and Janet have said, that the value of habitat is both to the homeowner, but also to engaging the broader community in housing and understanding the role of housing in breaking the cycle of poverty and kind of connecting them to the work of providing affordable housing. And I know that the local project committee worked hard to help leverage fundraising, particularly from the congregations in town, but also supporting the fundraising events that Habitat had specifically focused on the builds in Acton. So, you know, I do think that Habitat actually does itself a disservice by having such a simple pro forma, because the reality is there's a lot of sweat equity that's not shown in that $170,000, and there's also overhead and construction management work that Habitat is paying for with other sources that really should, if it were a normal pro forma, would be considered to be part of the uses that and would need a source. And they are paying for that with other funds besides the funds that they might raise from the town and from the ACHC. So I strongly support it and expect to support it at the ACHC.
Thank you, Bob and Janet. Are there, Dean?
Yeah, couple of points that I'd like to reiterate what Janet said about, you know, we've been receiving zero tax revenue from this property for quite some time. And I think bringing it back onto the tax rolls, getting a family in there, certainly it's going to be a remarkable improvement for the neighborhood, which I think is very important. And bring in the tax revenue, when you look at the $40,000 that they'll be requesting from CPC, town will recoup that fairly quickly. So I feel a lot better about that. As the board's rep on CPC, I've certainly seen a lot of other proposals have been approved that frankly don't have the social benefits that this one does. The one thing that I will also state is that presumably Habitat's not going to have a chance to come back to CPC to look for that money for quite some time. So in the meantime, certainly if they can come up with some additional fundraising, they might not have to ask for the full $40,000, but it's a fairly modest amount, in my opinion. I think it'll pay some great benefits to everybody, you know, the neighborhood, the taxpayer, and certainly the family.
Thank you. Would there be audience questions and comments?
We do have one from Tara.
Sure, Tara, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So I love this project for so many reasons. First, I want to say that owning is not always the best way to gain wealth, and promoting homeownership is problematic when we're trying to be climate, in the climate emergency, it's not necessarily the best thing to do. However, this is an existing building, and I agree with Dean that it'll recoup. Also, it's not 100% paid for by local taxpayers, but honestly, this is just a wonderful project that will repay itself over and over again in carbon footprint, in equity, and even in dollars. And so I urge you to approve this. I think you probably will. I would like to see more of this. I'd love to see a housing rehab trust that takes on these projects. I believe that we can make these types of projects be funding neutral by leveraging the town borrowing ability. And so thank you for bringing this project forward. I love it. And please bring more of this. Thank you. And also, relative to equity and opportunity, I am very much for equity and opportunity. And I hope that it's possible that you could, when we think about deed restricting units like this, that if we could add a clause in that gives an advantage to people coming from environmental justice zones, because now they have been declared. So it's not about race as much as a disadvantage relative to where people grew up or where they're living. And so I urge you to push forward on those possible, criteria. Thank you.
Are there any other citizen comments?
There are not, no.
Okay. So for next steps, John, what may we do to move the project forward?
So the next step would be, if the board supports this proposal, we would put it on the warrant for town meeting just to authorize the board to dispose of it for this purpose. Because we did an RFP, it's required that the town meeting authorize this board with the ability to sell it, in this case for $1, I believe, for a specific purpose, which would be affordable housing. The board has to declare the property surplus. You could do that now, or you could do that at the town meeting. That's up to the board.
Okay, but the motion to advance it to town meeting would be precisely?
Just, I think a motion to support the proposal from Habitat to redevelop the 26 Carlisle Road property and take necessary actions to advance it through town meeting process. Or something better than that.
Okay. Okay, is there a second?
Sure, I second that.
Thank you. Okay, is there any further discussion from board members?
Who made the motion?
I did.
Okay,
Joan.
sorry, I didn't see that, sorry.
Okay, so if with no further questions, comments from board members, David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye.
Okay, David?
John, I would like to move that we declare the 26 Carlisle Road property surplus.
Second.
Can I just speak to that?
Sure. Well, if Joan's second, then you could speak.
She did. I think it's important to have that declaration in place before town meeting, because it's going to be important to speak to if someone asks the question at town meeting.
Okay. Okay, so you moved, Joan seconded. Are there any further comments from board members? Okay, then David, call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
I say aye as well, so that's unanimous too.
Thank you, board. Actually, since you mentioned that, another thing that would be good to button up is that the board accept the proposal and authorize me to finalize terms of the P&S purchase and sales agreement, which would be subject to a town meeting, or which would be contingent on a town meeting vote.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
David. Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, David, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
I say aye. That's unanimous.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Sully.
Thank you, Carolyn. Selby, well done. The next item would be to approve the amendment to the lease for the professional ambulance and oxygen service and approve a one-year lease extension at 21 Maple Street. The materials were in the packet. John, if you would just just offer a brief overview?
Thank you. So when we purchased the 19 and 21 Maple Street property from Mr. Richards, at the town meeting authorization, we also received authorization to lease it out, in this case to the existing tenant who uses, so Pro EMS is an ambulance company, and they use the very front portion of the building closest to the train station ramp. They've been doing that for several years. We had renewed the existing lease in place for a year, and it's coming up due. And so the proposal before the board is to authorize me, or just to authorize the extension of 1 year for that lease. And it's also an amendment to clarify how they're paying for utilities. They had agreed to do it, but it wasn't formally part of the lease. So it is now, if the board approves what's before you.
So move.
Well, see, it's two, I guess it's two motions, John, that we have to vote on tonight, two separate authorizations.
I think you can approve the amendment and a 1 year extension of the lease in one motion. I made you do 3 last time. I don't want to do that again. I'm sorry.
Okay. The first page of the handout we're voting two things. To approve the amendment, and then second is all actions on your part to effectuate the amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Would you want me to read what we're voting on? We're set?
As presented in the packet.
As presented in the packet. So the motion would be to approve as presented in the packet the amendment to the lease and to authorize the town manager to take all actions to effectuate the lease amendment. Is there
I move.
It was so moved by Joan. Is there a second? Second, Dean. Is there any further discussion? Yeah, David?
So, John Majorati, I was wondering how you expect this would interact with the proposed feasibility plans for 19 to 21 Maple Street and the use of that structure. Do you expect that those uses, of course, we would need tenants and things for the proposed uses, but do you expect that those would happen after a 1 year time frame?
Yes, I think we could coordinate the next year's renewal to make sure timing is right. I don't think we'll have anything that far along to affect this first year. The preferred option that the board voted to support a few weeks ago would not, doesn't include a driveway in its current location. And so it wouldn't really support the current ambulance operations as they are now. So that's a discussion that I think we'd have to have. But I think it's safe to move forward with this, knowing that would take more than a year to turn all that around, realistically.
Thank you.
Jim?
That was my question. I'm all set.
Okay. So if there's no further questions and comments, David, if you'd call the roll then.
Mr. Snyder-Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
I say aye, so that's unanimous.
Okay. So our final item under new and special business is to discuss the proposed drive-up window zoning bylaw, which was included in the packet. Deed, if you would lead the conversation.
Sure, thank you. So, as you all recall, we decided that we wanted to move ahead with this or investigate allowing drive-up windows for restaurants and pharmacies. And we had some sort of specifics. This was way back last spring. They went forward to the planning department, and planners worked on this, put it in the proper format, and had a series of outreach meetings and forums, and quite a bit of citizen input. Some surveys were sent out. Before I go any further, I'd just like to commend the town staff, especially Kristen Bouchard, for the great job that she did in putting this together and pursuing it. Really nicely done. So the results were interesting. That there was, at least amongst the folks that were participating in the survey, there was tremendous support for drive-up windows for both restaurants and pharmacies. The demographic breakdown was interesting because a lot of many more women were in favor of the drive-up windows than men. And I expect that's probably because mom still gets stuck with having to find supper for the kids and pick up the medications for the sick children that are in the back of her car. So that was interesting. Some of the input also was people relating anecdotes about going to other towns to use these facilities. And it'd be nice to be able to bring some of that revenue and that commerce back into Acton. So the planning board met a couple of weeks ago, came up, had a hearing about this, and they're recommending bylaw, which is in the packet. It was not a unanimous, it was a unanimous vote to recommend that it go to town meeting. I think there's still some individual members of the planning board that have some diverse feelings about it, but they think it's very important that this be brought to town meeting. It is subject to a 2/3 vote. I also spent a great deal of time talking with the design review board about some of these issues. And largely as a result of my discussions with the DRB, the document you see in front of you is a little bit different than the direction that we had thought originally. The one big significant difference you'll see here is that we're recommending that any drive-through window for restaurants and pharmacies in any district in town where they'd be allowed would be in a special permit situation. So there'd be a great deal of scrutiny for these applications. Make sure that's really the appropriate location. We certainly have all eyes on these things, especially a lot of input from the design review board. And that's because, especially if you're trying to put these around existing buildings, there are a lot of, topographical issues. There's issues of the architecture of the building, traffic flow, proximity to residential neighbors. And it just seemed like we really want to make sure that we get this right and that people get the opportunity to have a really good situation here. I think it's also important to figure that we're not going to have a lot of these. I think we could, 5 years down the road from now, we could have 5 new drive-ups, and we'll say, what was the big deal? I don't think it's going to be a big push on these. I think most likely this will happen to a couple of the existing buildings, and probably it's going to be applicable to brand new buildings, so they'll be able to be designed right from the beginning to make sure that there's proper access, that it's cited correctly. One of the other issues that you see that came up as a result of the citizen input during the planning board meeting was we put in some regulations about the volume of the speakers, so that when you drive up there, be a noise attenuation so that you don't have a outrageously loud speaker system that could go out into the neighborhood, especially in the evenings. Surprisingly enough, there was actually, I had kind of figured that everybody would be in favor of having these things for pharmacies, but having them for drive-up restaurants might be kind of a push. And actually, it seems like the opposite has happened. Do have 2 members of the planning board that were very concerned because they think it's important to encourage face-to-face interaction between a customer and a pharmacist. I think with a drive-up window, that can still be done. I think there's a lot of transactions that are carried out in pharmacies with routine medications getting filled that you don't need that interaction. And also, I'm not sure that, trying to regulate how you interact with the medical professional is probably not something that we should deal with zoning. But that is and that point there was actually one of the points of contention with the planning board, some internal discussion. So we'll probably hear that coming up at town meeting. So that's basically, we come back with a bylaw, which I feel very confident in. I think it's a very modest proposal. I think there's lots of safeguards, make sure that we get what we want here. If anybody has any specific questions, you want to bring them up now, and we can certainly do some more research. I probably boot a lot of that over to Kristen. And then we can come back at one of our meetings later on in the month to before we take a formal vote on it. But I'm all ears for anybody that's got any ideas.
No questions or comments from board members? Joan?
Yeah, one of the questions came up at the planning board meeting about the number of windows. And
Right.
I've been to a number of drive-up situations, and there's one for ordering, one for paying, and one for pickup. So there are usually 3 windows, not 3 separate ordering windows.
Right, and that was something that I had noticed when I was doing some of my research driving up to McDonald's all over eastern Massachusetts. So the new wording you've got there now actually would allow that. Typically, you've got an ordering kiosk, you've got a pay window, and you've got a pickup window. It's important to keep these transactions separated for 2 reasons. One is sanitation, so you don't have the same person putting your hamburger together that's taking your money. And the other thing is just as far as being able to facilitate the transaction and keep a smooth flow of traffic through there. I think if you try to put everything all in one window, it's really going to cause a lot of delays. So I think that's the wording we've got now will allow that.
Jim?
So I'm sure this should go ahead to town meeting. I'm personally still torn by how I'm going to vote, either as a town meeting member or as a recommending or not board member. I think my main concerns are about the planning direction of the town, about increasing walkability. I think that's not necessarily an overwhelming negative on this proposal. I think it's carefully crafted to allow pedestrians, the full access and interaction with the stores. So I think this version of the bylaw is better than the previous one that went down. And I'm also drawn to it because of the ability to serve people with disabilities or people with, children who even so-called normal children who can sometimes be very difficult to deal with in a situation outside of a car. So I guess I don't have any specific recommendations other than to say, just to sort of to note ahead of time that I'm still torn by the articles. The only other thing I'm thinking of, Dean, is, and I'm not sure this is a good idea, but it's just a question for you. If you are concerned about reaching the 2/3 threshold, and remembering how close we got to it last time, would it make sense to separate restaurants and pharmacies in case one reaches the threshold and the other doesn't?
Well, we've debated that back and forth. And with the initial thought that I had that, pharmacies would be a slam dunk and restaurants could be a stretch, and now it seems like it's the other way around. I don't know is that's going to make much difference one way or another. It is going to be a close thing. As far as your question about the walkability, we spent a lot of time kicking that around. And in the bylaw draft you see in front of you, there are some specific recommendations or requirements when you're in those village districts, putting them in the back of the facility, that sort of thing. But I mean, ultimately, I think walkability is a great idea. And if you live in close proximity, say to a CVS or an Acton pharmacy or wherever, yeah, it's great if you can walk down there, but we're 20 square miles and there's only 3 pharmacies in town. So, you know, if you need a medication, there's probably a limited number of people are actually going to be able to walk there. So certainly it's a consideration. It's certainly something we spent a lot of time talking about, but I think that the larger portion of the population lives in a remote enough location that walking to a pharmacy is probably not feasible in many situations. Also, as far as the food service establishments, yeah, I think the desire is that, yeah, we'd love to have patios, we'd love to have people come in and sit down and, you know, make it not only getting a meal, but it's a social operation as well. But then there's a lot of people who are on their way to work and they just want to swing by and grab a cup of coffee. And I think I don't think we're going to increase the number of cars on the road. It's just a matter of convenience. And frankly, given the opportunity, if you're going to a Dunkin' Donuts, you know, you can drive in, you can park, you can walk in, get your cup of coffee, go back out again, you've used up the parking space, whereas it's a drive-through and you just grab your cup of coffee and keep on going. So I don't think it's going to have a tremendous impact on the atmosphere in the town.
David.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that this is by special permit. I also agree that with the improvements that were made since, you know, earlier ideas for this bylaw. If it wasn't a special permit, I would almost certainly have voted against, because I think that it's almost impossible to codify all the details around access to the building with cars crossing past, either with other cars and pedestrians, and expected volumes and all sorts of things. And so I'm very glad that this is by special permit. And, you know, I think that I'll be supporting this now.
Thank you. That's exactly those points, David, were the ones that were made many times by DRB and by the planning board, and even Kristen, Robert Hummel, and myself, kicking these things around. It quickly became obvious that there was no way that you could come up with one set of standards that would apply in all locations. So a special permit just seemed like the best way to go about it.
Okay. Any comments from audience members?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. We do have one from Deborah Symes.
Sure, Deb. Please.
Hi, thanks, guys. So the state shares one of my pet peeves, which is people who idle their cars for longer than 5 minutes. There is a state statute that says you may not do that unless you're, you know, in a category of emergency vehicle or whatever. And that has always been the thing that is stuck in my craw about these drive-up windows, because, and I think this is more true of restaurants than pharmacies likely, that you can get an aggregation of a bunch of cars sitting there idling, you know, for however long it takes them to make their way through. So whether this the comment I'm going to make belongs at this stage of the game, or if it belongs more in the set of parameters that might, you know, be used in the special permitting process. One thought is this: we already don't really enforce the idling law here in town much, but if we could look at better enforcement or some enforcement combined with signage that, you know, is prominent and really says, please turn off your cars while you're waiting in line. You know, by the way, there's a law that says you can't idle for more than 5 minutes. So that would be my contribution, hoping that we can somehow work that in at some stage of this process. Thanks.
Thanks, Deb. Dean.
Yeah, and thank you, Deb, for those points. There's a couple of issues here, and part of this goes, frankly, directly to the idea of making this a special permit to make sure that you can get a smooth flow of traffic and you move people through the line quickly, so you don't have Also, there's, a lot of vehicle improvements are coming out, with cars, if you don't move very long, they shut down. And certainly you've got a lot of these, hybrid and full electric vehicles. So certainly the whole idea about having lots of idling cars in close proximity to folks, that was certainly something that we talked about quite a bit. And we think within the parameters of a special permit, we can make sure that there's you don't have that situation where somebody's waiting in line for 10 minutes with their diesel truck running. But thank you for your thoughts on that.
Thank you. Any, Matt, any further citizen comments?
That does it.
Okay. Any further comments from board members? Okay, so it looks like we will be in good shape on the drive-up windows article. So that would end our new and special business. Let me go through the consent items. 8, approve meeting minutes March 29 and April 5, 2001. 9, approve executive session minutes March 15th, 2021. And accept Kelly's Corner right-of-way acquisition 246 to 248 Main Street. 11, one-day alcoholic beverage license for Angie L. Calderon, Madrid, Nara Park, July 10, 2021. 12, accept gift recreation department for $100 from Ruth Landry to be used for constructing a dog park in Acton. Do I have a motion then to approve consent items 8 through 12 inclusive? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Gentlemen, David, thank you. So being no further discussion, David, please call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye. So those are adopted unanimously.
Okay, so thank you. So we'll meet again on the 17th and pencil on your schedule the 24th. So with that, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Joan, is there a second?
Second.
David? Okay, David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.